So good morning, and I'd like to thank Infocom for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on my vision for an IT-enabled secure state. I don't have a very long presentation, and my intention is really to cover really three aspects. I wanted to share with you some of the trends which are taking place from a technology perspective, and using that, I wanted to talk about how it can actually help create what I would consider a model state. But there are certain challenges in being able to use technology to do that, and those are related to the concept of security. And therefore, I wanted to link all of it together, how IT is a very powerful influence and how it can bring about dramatic transformation in terms of how we govern, how we a state, how do we look after the people, how do we ensure that they are empowered, and how do we ensure that we have a growth economy. But at the same time, it has its challenges, and a lot of it is related around certain areas which I'll talk about. So while IT is the enabler, it can also be a challenge in terms of the way it is deployed. So let's talk about some of the technology megatrends which are taking place today. I'm sure over the course of the last 2 days, a lot of speakers have talked to you about it. These trends are actually culminating into what we call a new era of computing, which in Microsoft we like to define as connected devices and continuous cloud services. Mobility is one of the key attributes of computing today. And in the good old days, when you had a PC on everybody's desk and you had these data centers to which they were connected, very tightly coupled in a client-server kind of a computing environment, it was all about how do you make the IT workers more efficient, how do you make the knowledge workers more efficient. But today, the knowledge worker no longer sits on the table. There is far more value to be realized being in front of customers, and therefore you need to make sure that the sales guy is also IT enabled, not just on his desk, not just in front of a customer, but even in between. It's the same thing if you start looking at what's happening to us as consumers. We get up in the morning, we read the newspaper, or perhaps a lot of us who are in our 20s or 30s just switch on a tablet or we switch on a PC and we read the latest news from there. Or if some of us are slightly older, we may switch on the TV. And if we have on demand, then we actually look at the newspaper or the channels which we really want to see. We then hop into a car and then perhaps we're using our mobile phone to see what's the next set of engagements we have. Once we reach the office, we have another set of devices which are awaiting us there, or we use the same device which we at home, because now all of our enterprises are allowing us to do what we call bring your own device to work, and we then get into our work environment. So this distinction between our personal life, our work life, being able to compute while you're at home or at work or even in between is part of this whole new era of computing, which we call mobility. And this can bring about tremendous efficiencies in terms of productivity. It brings about the ability to interplay between the home and the work. It sort of blurs the line between them. It does impose challenges on the enterprises, but it also therefore enables the workforce to be a lot more productive because they're using the same technology at home as they're using in their workplace. We call this the consumerization of IT, where the devices which we use at home and for play, we now bring to work. The advent of social networking is also huge of importance. Because data is now being created on the fly. It's the data which you create and in your own companies, the transactions which you create are valuable to you as you analyze them, as you look at how to use that, not just in terms of understanding the historic trends, but also to predict the future. But the data you are creating through social networks is even more important. This data is being constantly captured. It gives you the ability to not just look at the past, but also to predict the future, not just from the data which you own, but from data which is being created across multiple kinds of devices and by multiple kinds of people over Facebook, over Twitter, being able to consolidate that and really understand what are the demands and consumption patterns, what are the future predictions which are likely to take place. So social networks is becoming important because the data which is created enables us to do a lot more in terms of future prediction. Same thing with big data. The data is being captured not just by what human beings create, but also by devices. I mean, London today is considered to be the most wired city in the world. You cannot walk for more than 5 minutes without being captured on some form of TV or the other. The moment you log on with your credit card, the moment you log on to your own Wi-Fi in your hotel, all that information is being captured. And that data exists. And the ability to be able to capture that data and then understand what people are doing, where they are going, and being able to put it all together is what big data is all about. And the ability to analyze that can have a huge impact in terms of predicting, for example, not just predicting what is the, IT will enable you to predict whether an individual, what sickness he has, but it could also predict what future illness he could have. And that information could then be used by an insurance company to either deny somebody a health insurance, or it could be used by a doctor to figure out what medicine is required to prevent future illnesses. So the same information can be used by two different organizations for two completely different purposes. So big data is being created. It's all over the place, and the ability to be able to capture that is becoming critical. What links that all together, mobility, social networks, big data, is the cloud. And the cloud, as the Montreal Gazette talked about it, is that after fire and wheel, cloud is the new game changer. And the cloud is really becoming all pervasive. You must have heard about this over the last 2-3 days. And like I mentioned in the beginning, from a Microsoft perspective, we believe that that is the new form of computing. It is going to be all about connected devices, mobile devices. It's going to be about social networks and the information which is generated there. It's going to be able to capture big data and use that for predictive and analytics and for other purposes. And it's all about being able to manage that using cloud and delivering various kinds of applications and services to the cloud. So let's take a leap into the future and look at the role of the internet as we move into 2020. And this is a map of the world. And it really goes to show how China and India are going to play a very, very important role in the future of the internet economy. We are seeing a huge shift, a very profound shift in scale, scope, and character of the cyberspace and the internet. And recent studies have shown that the internet is going to have a sweeping impact on a country's economic vitality and growth. So what you see on this slide is the world of the internet users and the internet penetration in the year 2020. And as you can see, the map has been expanded to over 123 countries, and both India and China, thanks to our demographics, will be very strong participants in the internet economy. And I'd like to share with you some of the statistics or some of the, the data of what this implies. In the year 2020, which is just over 7 years from today, there will be 4 billion people who are going to be online. That's nearly double the number of people who are online today. And it's not just the users or people who are going to be connected to the internet. It's also going to be about devices, because the internet is going to move from an internet of people to the internet of devices. We're already seeing that. And there will be over 50 billion devices which are going to be connected to the internet, all creating data and all of some form or the other on a continuous basis. These will be infrastructure, cars, homes, personal devices, clothing, and more. And these will be employed as sensors and generate data, and in some case, make and transmit decisions machines to machine beyond the speed of what humans can actually do. So you will find that devices will now start taking a lot of the decisions which you were doing earlier. Think about a car. A car today, you have sensors in it, you have GPS, and it can actually navigate by itself. It can take decisions as to when it will brake, all outside the purview of human control. In 2011 alone, this year or last year, over 1.8 zettabytes or 1.8 trillion gigabytes of data had been created, which is the equivalent to every equivalent to every 320 million people writing 3 tweets per minute for 30,000 years. And that data is going to increase by a factor of 50 times. So the data volumes are also going to surge. And therefore, the ability to analyze that data and use it for the good of mankind is going to be something which is going to become even more important. What is important, or what is critical, is that in this internet economy, the size of this internet economy itself is going to be $4.2 trillion, which essentially is bigger than the GDP of West Germany today. So the internet economy itself is going to be perhaps the 3rd or 4th largest economy which we will have in the world, assuming that the internet was a single country. Just to switch gears, let's talk about what is the role of a state. And if you think about a state or a country or a nation, its objective is to really provide growth that is balanced, that is sustainable, and that is inclusive. That means all sections of society are participating in the growth. This is really the mission statement of the Government of India as part of its 12th five-year plan. And if you look at where IT can play a role, it's in multiple areas, but I've chosen really 4 areas where I believe that IT can have a big impact. One is in the area of education and employability. The second is in improving governance and providing far greater transparency. Number 3, it's about providing competitiveness to the state or to the nation. And the 6th is in helping building a robust digital economy. And while the 4th is not really an outcome, it is an essential requirement, which is how do you do all of this using IT, but to do it very securely, and to ensure that the security of the nation, both from an internal perspective and an external perspective, is provided. So this is really the role of government, and this, again, are roles where IT can have a big impact. Let's talk about education and employability, for example. If you look at us as a nation, our future competitiveness is going to be very heavily dependent on the demographic dividend, which I think we as a country are going to receive. And that dividend is basically the fact that our population is, age of our population is actually declining. We will be the youngest nation in the decade of the 2020s. But that youthful population, if we are going to be able to really use, then we have to ensure that they are educated, that they are skilled, and that they have jobs available to them. And IT will play an important role to make that happen. Whether it is in the school system, K-12, whether it is in the college or higher education, or whether it is in vocational guidance, IT is going to play a very, very important role. And the Government of India has a plan to create 500 skilled people, because that's the level of new jobs which are going to be created between now and the next 20 years. And therefore, IT is going to play a very important role. And the Government of India has various missions to be able to make that happen. A large number of private sector corporations working with industry, working with education, working with state government are focused on working and ensuring that school children get access to computing at a very early age. Teachers are trained to use the latest tools so that they can make teaching much more exciting. In higher education, the idea is to continue to create the software and technical skills, as well as provide the business acumen through business and soft skill, so that we can continue to fuel the IT industry. The IT industry in India today already employs about 3 million people. It's expected that that will go to about 5 or 6 million people over the next 10 years, so there's a huge requirement there itself. And on top of it, it generates an additional 3 to 4 million indirect employment. So therefore, the opportunity for IT to bring this about is huge. But it's not just about fueling the requirements of the IT industry. Practically every sector of the Indian industry in future are going to require IT savvy or business savvy people, whether it's financial services, whether it's telecom, whether it's retail, hospitality and leisure, or manufacturing. And therefore, it is important that we continue to provide or create more colleges, more schools, and more learning opportunities and more skill opportunities, retraining and skill opportunities for the Indian population. IT is also going to play a very important role in terms of governance. I think all of us have heard about the government's mission mode projects. Practically every state government now has a data center. All of them are running various different kinds of citizen services. 26 states, 26 data centers, plus a number of data centers which the central government ministries have. And just imagine the huge cost which has gone into make that happen. Applications have been repeated and deployed multiple times, all written by different states. With the advent of some of the new trends which we talked about, the opportunity to collapse that into a few data centers using cloud technology, using multi-tenanted application, using applications which can then be the same applications which can then be deployed across multiple states will really help in improving governance and providing far greater speed in terms of deployment of these applications. And the government of India is seriously looking at creating a national cloud infrastructure or multiple national cloud infrastructure which will enable this to happen. I can give you an example of the Madhya Pradesh State Data Center, which actually created a forest application which is running in the Madhya Pradesh Data Center, tuned for the Madhya Pradesh Forest Department. It's a multi-tenanted application. And this has now been offered and is being used by the J&K state government, which is using the same data center, the same application, but customized from a user perspective for the J&K Forest Department. Different structure, different organization, different logos, different processes, but they're able to do this using a virtualized environment of a data center which is running in a different state. That's the kind of area where a cloud can play a very, very important role. Technology will also play an important role in terms of accessibility. The digital inclusion is as important as financial inclusion. So therefore, people who are differently abled, the people who are blind or are unable to hear or have any other challenges in terms of absence of limbs, they need to also get into the digital environment and be able to access the internet, just like every one of us out here. And therefore, accessibility is important, and technology is playing an important role to make that happen. We are a country with many diverse languages, so the lack of knowledge of English should not be the reason why people cannot have a different digital lifestyle. And therefore, the ability to provide technology or to allow people to interface with technology using different languages is also going to be important. So you will find that technology will play a very, very important role in bringing about far greater inclusion using natural user interfaces like touch or motion sensors or gestures. And this is going to be very, very critical if we are really going to be providing inclusive growth. From a competitiveness perspective, I think we should be proud of the fact that the Indian IT industry is today close to a $100 billion industry. Like I said, it's 7.5% of the GDP. It's still one of the fastest growing economies which we have, industries which we have in India. It's expected that over the course of the next 10 years, it can grow to about 200 billion. It employs 3 million people and another 4 million externally. So it's a great, and it happened in the last 20 years. It's not something which is, has been in work for a long time. But now IT has to move into not just the IT industry, but it has to be used in other industries. And therefore, IT, which will enable other manufacturing, financial services, telecom, this is going to become much, much more important. Enhancing the competitiveness of overall Indian industry using IT is going to be important. Unfortunately, the usage of IT in these industries is still very low. The total, out of the $100 billion IT industry which we have here in India, only $20 billion is really for domestic consumption. And if you think about the fact that we're a $1.4 trillion economy, that really is a very small usage. So therefore, if you really want to kickstart the economy, if you really want to make India much more competitive, then it's important that there is a lot more IT usage taking place across industry. And therefore, IT will play a role in enhancing the competitiveness of the Indian industry. There's a new economy which is appearing. We call it the digital economy. If you think about travel today, most of you most probably use an online site. You most probably book your tickets directly online. Very few of you are going to a physical travel agent. Most of you are going to an online travel agent. Most of you are most probably buying something or the other from Flipkart or from Amazon or from any other of the website. E-commerce is going to become big, and it's going to rival retail, physical retail in terms of its size. You're going to see a lot more transactions taking place over the net. You heard most probably yesterday from Nandan Nilekani how all the NREAJ subsidies are now going to move into electronic mode, because that's the only way to ensure transparency and to ensure that the sections of society which should receive this money are actually receiving it, and they're receiving it securely, and they're receiving it, and the right persons are receiving it. So this huge new digital economy is being built. It's continuing to grow. We have a very thriving software economy. We as a company, Microsoft, we believe that we are responsible for the nearly 2 million developers in this country, and we are really excited by the amount of entrepreneurship we are seeing. The good old days when you needed to take a couple of years before you could come out with a product idea, take it to market, and start making money, and requiring huge amounts of funding from the startup all the way to maturity, is actually shrunk. Today, it's possible for a high school student to come out with a great idea, build an application, put it onto a phone, a Windows phone, or an Apple iTunes store, or onto the Google Marketplace, and just charge $1 or 10 rupees, and then do a couple of 100,000 transactions on that if it's successful, and then become rich in a short period of something like about 6 months to a year. You don't need to own anything. You can download the tools, you can create the applications, and then you can go and pay for somebody's cloud services to actually host that application, and then submit it to somebody's store so that it goes market. And if it goes viral, then you're a millionaire. So we're seeing that happen as part of the overall digital economy. One part of the digital economy which I think still is absent in India is the lack of local manufacturing of devices. If you think about the future of computing, it's about connected devices and continuous cloud services, then it's going to be important that as a company we start manufacturing devices here locally. We create those different form factors which everybody is going to require. It's not just about PCs, it's not about tablets, it's not about desktop, it's about a huge variety of different kinds of devices, point-of-sale terminals, medical equipment, automobiles. All of these are going to become important, and we need to make sure that we have the capability here in India to build those kinds of devices, because we are a 1.4 billion population, and we will be served by at least 3 to 4x that in terms of devices, which are going to be part of this overall internet economy. The digital economy is also about smart grids. It's about smart cities. It's about making everything intelligent. And therefore, we see that happening here in India. Pondicherry is this first smart city project, which is likely to happen. We've seen smart grid projects for power across the length and breadth of the country. And we believe that that is going to be something which is going to accelerate. And we're going to see that happening in highways. We're going to see that in buildings. We're going to see that in cities. So the digital economy is going to become a big part of the future, and IT is going to enable that to happen. Security is also going to become important, because that is one of the roles of the state. For a model state, the citizen should feel that he is protected both from internal as well as external threats. And the challenge is that traditional threats, which most states have been geared up for, where you had an army, a navy, an air force, and paramilitary forces, and you had people at the borders, no longer are sufficient for the new digital economy. Today, without your even knowing it, your networks are under attack. People are going to be trying to break into and get your password so they can access your bank accounts and services. Confidential data of corporations are being hacked, and that information is being leaked and being used by competitors. Nations are threatening each other not through physical warfare, but through the internet. So therefore, security is going to have a different dimension altogether. terrorists are using networks, they're using various kinds of other methods to be able to sow terror or to even create terrorist acts. So security is going to have a completely different meaning in this new world. And it is the nation's priority. It is one of the roles of the government to ensure the security of the nation, even from a cyber security and electronics perspective. So if these are the priorities, then what are some of the challenges? Because if you think about computing, while computing will play an important role, and in fact is essential to make all of what I've tried to describe as a model state happen, then there is a challenge, there is the opportunity, but then there are the challenges. So there are two areas which I really wanted to highlight, and then I thought I'd just share with you some of my thoughts as to how we as a company, Microsoft, are trying to change the way we look at what we call trustworthy computing. But first, let's look at a world, a data-centric world. I've tried to describe that for you. I've tried to show you how, the consumerization of IT, the proliferation of devices, the creation of these new kinds of services, whether it's by government or by businesses, is creating a completely networked world. But what are the implications of that from really three areas? From a security perspective, from a privacy perspective, and from a reliability perspective. Because just now imagine if today when you think about your networks and you're not able to access your information, you feel as if there is something missing in your life. Your ATMs won't run, you won't be able to access your ATM information. If you walk into a hospital, you won't have access to your medical records. So the reliability of this network, the reliability of the devices which you have is becoming much more critical than it was ever before. But I'm moving a little ahead. Let's first talk about this new data-centric world, which I've tried to describe. The good old days, it was very simple. When we talked about the World Wide Web, there was you or me as an individual, and we had access to information which was stored in the form of documents. And it was a very simple relationship because me at the center was accessing information in different files in the network. And it was a one-to-one relationship. But if you think about the new world of the internet world of today, then it's a much more complex relationship because now it is no longer just about me accessing certain documents or information, bank records, telephone records, which are stored in the web and which I can access through an URL. But now it is about me accessing data, me accessing applications, me accessing other machines. And that relationship can continue n-fold. Because the machine I am accessing is accessing data in another machine somewhere else. And when I'm accessing information, that information may not be where I have direct access to, but it may be coming in from some other location. So if you look at the complexity of the network which we currently have, it is actually huge. And this is one of the challenges which we face when we're living in a data-centric world. So when we're moving to a world of connected devices, phones, computers, television, cars, and sensors, with devices now outnumbering the humans they serve, in this world, there are old forms of data, bank records and telephone records, but there's also new forms of data that may be particularly revealing. Example, user-created data on social networking sites or even geolocation data. The separation between an individual's personal and professional life is eroding as the consumerization of information technology, which refers to an individual's desire to pick IT devices and have those devices spans one's more professional and personal lives. But more important, there are now new centralized abilities to store, aggregate, search, analyze, and disseminate this rich data. The ability now exists not only to build a historical trail of a person's activities, but to predict their future behaviors in new and interesting ways. The data richness also means we cannot only treat people who are ill, but potentially predict the disease to which they are prone, a fact that could be used to either save a life or to deny health insurance. So these changes are really occasioned and is making this whole concept of privacy and security much more daunting because there are obvious and not so obvious risks. So the challenge is, how do we solve this in this interconnected world when the personal work data is so seamless, where you're using different kinds of devices, where you do not have direct control of any of the information which you are now accessing or storing. And therefore, what are the challenges which we need from a security, reliability, and from a data privacy perspective? The other key issue which we need to look at is, what is the role of government in all of this? So while we're moving to a data-centric world of connected devices, cloud services, what is the role of the government? And especially in a nation like ours, the government really has a daunting task. And we may, depending on the situation, we may praise the government or we may complain about the government. But think about the government today. It is a user of these kinds of networks. It is a user of, a creator of various kinds of information. It is very clear it wants to protect the liberties of its citizens. It wants to give the freedom of expression. But at the same time, it also has the responsibility, the challenge of providing security. It's an awesome challenge in this kind of a world, because the rules have changed. So while at one time you're trying to provide privacy to your individual citizens, especially the law-abiding citizens, at the same time you're trying to catch that terrorist who is exploiting the network for further their own ends. And this is the challenge which all governments face. At the same time, think about the state, that if it is going to protect us, it cannot always be on the defensive, it also has to be on the offensive. And therefore, governments need the ability to be able to attack another state or an asymmetric or a terrorist organization or potential hackers. It cannot just wait for something to happen. It also needs the ability to go out and wreak havoc using the network elsewhere. So cyber espionage is a reality. Nations and states have to build on that capability. So this is, again, one of the challenges which all governments are facing today. There are also other issues which the government has to look at. For example, if you're going to provide cloud services and you want to provide privacy of data for your citizens, then should that data only reside within the boundaries of the nation? What happens if those citizens' data are elsewhere? And let's say other governments want to have access to that data. What are the obligations which we have individuals have then? All of us are freely using various mails, Gmail, Hotmail. We are all using Facebook and Twitter. Unknowingly, we're giving away information about ourselves, about what we are doing. Every time you log on to a geolocation system or you make a booking in a restaurant, it actually then enables somebody who wants to know where you are, what you are doing, who are you meeting, what are you talking about. All that information exists, and it just requires a big brother to look into it and then decide what they want to do with that. So that's, again, where should that data reside? Who can access that data? So those are some of the challenges which you pose. You have given the right to various sites or various applications to take that data from you because you are accessed that. But what obligations do you have in how that data can be used is not something which is really very clearly drawn out today. Those are some of the challenges which this new era of technology is posing for us. And there is a role which government has to play, working with other governments, working with civil society, working with the industry, working with the judicial system to enable higher security, greater privacy, and greater reliability of these networks. So the role of IT has changed. It's a great enabler. It can help create what we call a model state. But at the same time, it's posing a lot of challenges in terms of what we call trustworthy computing. So as a corporation, 10 years ago, Microsoft took a decision that we needed to make computing much more trustworthy so that anybody who's using computing is able to place complete faith and trust in that environment in which he or she is operating. And we therefore took a conscious decision to focus on what we call 4 areas and to work with other organizations, standard bodies and governments and the legal system to try and ensure what we call trustworthy computing. The areas which we've identified were around security in multiple different forms, around privacy, around reliability, and around business practices. Now, security is about the data which is being created, which you have given by virtue of the usage, you have allowed others to capture. The issue now is how can that, where is that data stored? Is it stored reliably and securely? Is it in the network? Is it in somebody else's data center? Is it on your own machine? Whatever is in your own machine, you can work on and ensure that it is secure by making sure you have the right virus firewalls in place, that you're subscribing to the latest virus software. You can have a SLA with your Hotmail provider or for your mail provider to ensure that he provides the security of the email information which you have, or if you're working for an enterprise, then the enterprise provides you that security. But what happens thereafter? What happens if you're taking an application or a mail service or any other kind of service from somebody who's operating from a cloud? There's one person who's providing the application as a service, there's somebody else who's providing the infrastructure, there's a third company who's providing the network. Who is responsible for the security? You have no control over that. And therefore, security is therefore the responsibility of each one of those different layers. And Microsoft has been working with each one of these different components to try and ensure that security is built in. Privacy is about the data, which is your personal data. What rights do you have in terms of how that data is used? So you have done a search that enables various different companies to analyze what your habits are, what do you buy, where do you go. Now, how can they use that data? Can they use it for advertising? Can they use it to help you so that you can then, it can give you suggestions as what you should buy next, or which place should you go, or what future action should you take? One is something which you will accept, but the other one where they use that data so that somebody else can make money on it is something which you may not accept. So therefore, we are working with various organizations to try and understand what rights, how you can control the data which has been created, which is your data, and what rights and others have in terms of how they can use that data. And that's what privacy is all about. Protecting that data, giving you the rights to controlling it, and you enabling or being able to tell others as to what they can do with that data. Reliability is, again, it's a similar thing that you have all these, your front end is just a tablet, but that tablet is connected to a Wi-Fi network, which is connected to another broadband network, which is then connected to a set of servers. And how do you ensure that if power fails in one place, you still get access to services? Because everything now interdependent. It's no longer just something which you control. Even large corporations, sometimes, like a bank, takes a decision that they will have dual networks. And they will go to 2 network providers so that they provide redundancy of networks, not realizing that both the network companies are actually using the same fiber optic cable, so that if that fiber optic cable breaks, then you actually don't have redundancy. So it's a very complex world. Reliability has a completely different set of meanings. It's no longer about just the device which you use, but it's across the whole chain, and how do you manage that? So I just want to close by saying that I don't have answers to all of those, but this is really the focus of companies like Microsoft and other large organizations, is how do we continue to build this end-to-end trust? Because if you think about the future state, the IT-enabled state, there is a lot of good with which it can do, but the challenges and complexity and the challenges which you face around security, privacy, reliability are huge. In each one of these areas, including businesses, processes, we have identified how things are going to change, what we need to do differently, working, like I said, with other large organizations. And there is responsibilities which we as users will have, but there are also responsibilities which companies like us will have, merchants will have, governments will have. So I'd like to stop here because I really wanted to share. It's a new, exciting world, but there are challenges. And security is paramount, privacy is paramount, and we've got to build reliability into these networks if we're really going to get the benefits of what we call a model state. Thank you.